So like I said, now I really just want to focus on starting to show you guys sculpting, right? And one of the things about sculpting, remember, is we want to take advantage of the sculpting workspace, right? We, of course, have modeling. We have UV editing, which is where we were before for our UV and wrapping. You should generally have your UV and wrapping done before you sculpt. And then we go to the sculpting workspace, right? And the sculpting workspace does a couple of things, right? It gives you your sculpting tools on the side here. But also, you'll notice it kind of by default sets up kind of the matte cap stuff for you. Now remember, to get to the matte cap stuff, it is part of the normal shade, right? Remember, there's wireframe. Then there's kind of the full white sphere, which is normal shading. Then, of course, there's the one that kind of looks like the material sphere. And that's your kind of full EV textured, all that stuff. We'll see that a lot more when we do texture painting. So we want kind of of these buttons right here, we want kind of the white circle, the white sphere. Now, at the end of this, though, there's a little V pointing down, right? If we click on that, you'll see that you do have options for this. Things like backface culling, or you can control the opacity for your X-ray shading, right? Remember, there's X-ray. And now that that's on, you can actually control the transparency for that, right? But there's also something called matte cap, right? And when you switch to the sculpting workspace, it kind of turns matte cap on. It's a kind of temporary or virtual material. It's not really assigned to the object, but it kind of displays it on the object. You can switch it on the fly. These just shade the model a little bit better, right? You can kind of see how the shading has like more shadow, more contrast. It's showing a little specularity. But you could pick the different ones, right? If you click on the sphere itself, if I wanted something a little bit more kind of plastic or metal looking, right? Or reflective like a car, right? You'll see that you can actually kind of set those up for if you want to do like car modeling. If you just wanted to kind of be more of a little bit of a brown clayish look, you can get that. I kind of like this one. I like the color a little bit better. It's got a little more specular highlight to it. But there's a bunch in here, and you can pick a bunch of these different ones to get different looks, right? So they're kind of neat, and they're not what your final material will look like, but they kind of can be useful for seeing form and stuff like that. So I like these a lot. I actually even use them when I'm doing normal modeling, right? If I go to the modeling menu, I could turn matte cap and pick that for modeling, right? So even in the modeling viewport workspace, you have all this stuff as well. So I actually like having that on just for regular modeling. So just kind of a little bit about some of that stuff we did talk about, right, yesterday as kind of like our overview lecture, kind of for these fundamentals. And now we're just kind of doing a review lecture that we can video record. So of course, one of the other things too as well is you'll see that once you're in the sculpting menu and you've got a sculpting tool on, like the very top one is just your regular sculpt draw, you'll notice when you click on one of these, or you switch to sculpting and the sculpting tools come on, you'll notice up here, right? Right up here, you kind of see where my cursor's at. It's up in the top bar, kind of a little bit above the display the display stuff here. You'll see there's what looks like kind of like a butterfly that's kind of looks like it's cut in half or bisected. Remember, you have symmetry for sculpting and your move, rotate, and scale tools, right? So if move, rotate, or scale are on, if a sculpting tool's on, these will become available, right? They aren't full mirror though, right? The mirror modifier allows you to extrude, it allows you to loop cut, bridge, actually use modeling tools that add geometry. This won't work for that stuff. So when you're doing those kinds of things, making the appendages, you really need mirror modifier. These are really much more for shaping. In this case, you'll see I've got the X already on, but you see how you can turn it off or on. You can even turn them all on just like you can with the mirror modifier, right? So in this case, we turn X on, so I have kind of symmetry there. But this will also show up for your tweak, your move, rotate, scale tool. So basically any shaping tool, whether it's an actual sculpting tool or the regular manipulators like move, rotate, and scale, these will be available for symmetry shaping. But all modeling functions will not be available with this, right? I repeat, will not be. Only really shaping stuff. So just kind of reminding you about that so we can get symmetrical sculpting. And of course, what we want to do is we want to go to the blue wrench, right? That blue wrench, because that's our modifier, right? It's in the Properties menu, which is this whole big menu down the right side here. Blue wrench. And we go to Add Modifier. Now remember, if you're working on a smaller monitor, you might have to go down to the little triangle at the bottom and just hold your cursor over it, and then you'll see it kind of scrolls so you can see more. But multi-resolution should be right under mirror. Multi-resolution. We apply that, and this is going to give us the ability to multi-resolution sculpt. And this is the way sculpting works in all sculpting software. Whether you're using sculpting in Cinema 4D or Modo, or you're using Mudbox or ZBrush, at a basic level, the sculpting works the same way. Now, in this case, this multi-resolution really has 0, right? So it's basically just your low res. You'll see there is a button called Subdivide in this multi-resolution modifier right here. And the moment I do that, it's at level 1. In fact, you'll notice my polygon count went up a little bit. If you want to see that, kind of the two overlapping circles, one white, one kind of clear, you can turn statistics on, right? So you see how you can actually click on this V pointing down, statistics, right? And I'm going to subdivide again because I need to have more polygons. Now I'm at 24,000. Subdivide again, about 100,000. I'm going to subdivide one more time, get us up to like roughly 400,000. Now you see we're at 400,000 polygons, right? Now I also like to make sure my level viewport is up there. Sometimes it's at 0. So I like to make sure these are all kind of set to 4. You don't have to have them set to 4, but I just like consistency. But now you see there's all these levels. Now the nice thing is you see how you can actually turn them down right here. So right inside of your modifier, you could turn these down, right? If I want to go to 2, I could type in 2 for sculpt, right? If I want to go back up to 4, I could type in 4. As long as sculpt mode is on, though, right? That's the other thing. Remember, right up here in the top left corner where our object mode stuff would be, right? That goes back to object mode. We can still go to edit mode. But if you click on that pull-down menu, you'll see there is one called sculpt mode. And there is a quick key for that, a shortcut key, 5. And that turns sculpting on. It will fully show your multi-resolution and all your sculpting tools. And when you're in sculpt mode, page up and page down can actually go up and down your resolution. So you actually have a quick key for going up and down your sculpt resolution. Page up, page down, right? Page up, page down. So just a few things to kind of remind you guys about right there, right? That we've kind of talked about a little bit. So now at this point, we could do some sculpting, right? Now the very top brush is our draw for sculpting, right? Now, if you aren't using a Wacom pen and tablet, you probably don't really need the strength pressure on, although it won't really matter. It is a cool feature though, particularly if you're using a Wacom tablet and Wacom pen. But you can turn this off and on, right? The strength is right here. That's the amount it's going to sculpt out, so we have a lower number there. I also tend to like to go to my very top kind of little menu option for properties here, the screwdriver and wrench. They're white at the very top, but it's a screwdriver and a wrench. If I click on that, you'll see that that brings up the sculpt options for this tool. One of them is strength, right? And you'll see there's a button. It's not blue right now, and that's called Unified Strength, and that's kind of like two brushes, right? Two brush icons. I like having that off. That way, it will not have the same uniform strength for all your brushes. That way, if we want our smooth strength to be lower than our sculpt strength, we could do that, right? So I actually prefer having that off because I often want my different brushes to have different sculpt strengths. So something kind of good to know there. But at this point, I can really just come in here and sculpt. Now, sculpting is pretty easy. And remember, I do like going to Edit Preferences, Navigation, and I like having Orbit Around Selection on for this. Actually, I have it on by default nowadays because it's just cool all around. It's whatever you have selected or even whatever you last tweaked when you're doing regular modeling, it'll set your camera focus and rotate around that. So it's kind of a cool way to have it focus on the area you're working on, right? So I could easily just kind of left-click, drag, to pull this form out, right? You see how it's kind of pulling that shape out a bit there? So what it's doing is it's moving those polygons, and there's a lot more, basically outward, sometimes along the screen, but to a certain extent along the normal direction if you have a certain tool. But it's just pulling out that geometry. Now remember, by default, this draw brush, it's your normal kind of first sculpting brush, is set to plus. That means it pulls the polygons outward, right? Outward along the kind of where the brush is at, basically, right? The negative pushes in. But there is a shortcut key for that, right? Control. So if I hold down Control on my keyboard, you'll notice it pushes in. And this is universal. If you go to another package for sculpting, you will generally find things like, particularly if it's like Mudbox or Modo, anything that doesn't use or that uses Alt for navigation, which is what we're using. We're using industry compatible for Blender, can allow you to just Control lets you inverse the brush. So you don't have to keep going and turning things off and on. You can just say, hey, I want to pull out. So I left mouse drag to sculpt a little bit. I want to push in. So hold down Control a little bit. And remember, there is a smooth brush. We talked about this the other day as well. It's kind of the first of the orange, right? There's 4 oranges here. The very first one is smooth. This is kind of like de-wrinkling a surface, right? So when you smooth an area, it's basically just trying to kind of soften it or get rid of any wrinkles or shape. Shift is the quick key for that. So if you hold down Shift, it automatically is going to go to smooth. And you see how I can kind of soften some areas. So if I go to the back here, I can hold down Shift, and you see how it allows us to blend or fade that in a pretty cool way. So smooth is very, very useful. In fact, it's kind of one of those things where at its core level, you're going to just left mouse to do shape, then you're going to control the inverse shape, and then you're going to smooth to kind of soften or blend or fade geometry into the surrounding area, because rarely does it just have a sharp crease, right? It often kind of blends in at some point. It fades away at a certain point. We usually call those transitions. So Shift will allow you to smooth that stuff. So that right there by itself is just the regular draw brush. You see how I can kind of pull that form out a little bit there. If I want, I can come in here and hold down Control to kind of develop a little more crease around the mouth. I can Shift to soften this area, right? So Shift left mouse drag. You see how it kind of softens that area around there and does a better fade. So sculpting is a lot about just pushing and pulling surfaces, right? I can pull these out, Shift to smooth, so I can kind of have that fade and blend more at the top there, a little bit more at the bottom. So just with the draw brush, you can left mouse click drag to pull surface out, Control to push it in, Shift to soften or smooth, right? That kind of tries to de-wrinkle, and it has the effect of softening, right? You see, I can kind of blend it in. So kind of some neat core functionality, and that's the way it always works for all of this stuff. Now, one of the cool things is, of course, I can hit page down, and if I want to go to a lower level and do some shaping at a lower level, also your right and left bracket keys, right? The ones that look like parentheses, but they're not exactly. They're kind of like square, right? They're kind of right next to P and like right above Enter. Those will actually make your brush size bigger or smaller, depending on which bracket key you select. And of course, radius is right here as well, just like strength. So strength is the amount. If I turn that up high, so it pulls out a lot. I tend to go and err on the side of subtlety, so I'll turn my strengths down lower. But radius is the size of the brush itself. And you notice how I can kind of go in here with a larger brush and pull this form out, right? So we can really kind of start to pull some of this shape out there. And if I go to page up, you notice how it survives, right? I went down to level 2, and I did shaping, and then when I go back up to level 4, it's still there. Just like as we go down, we'll lose this, but as we go back up, it's still there. This is why it's called multi-res or multi-resolution, because that's what it's really doing, is it's giving us the ability to have multiple active, non-destructive resolution levels, right? And resolution is really, when you're talking about polygons, it's just how many polygons you have. Low res is less polygons. High res is more polygons. And the more you subdivide, the more polygons you get. But you can go up and down those levels to work on them. Now, some other brushes you have that you might like are things like the crease brush, right? We saw the crease brush the other day. And this one actually automatically pushes in, and you see the brush here actually has a pinch control, right? Regular draw doesn't have that, right? So crease does have some of its own controls, like how much it's going to pinch. And this is great at doing creases, right? So if you want to start to kind of add in wrinkles or kind of fatter fold shapes, right? This can be a really cool way to start that off, right? It kind of does this nice little pinching in here. So I could really come in here and start to do some cool little shaping. And you see how that orbit selection, my camera rotates around what I have selected. So that ends up being really cool, because then I can come in here and do a little bit of work there, and I can start to just get kind of some creases or folds. And you see how it can kind of really allow us to start to enhance the body more, right? And give kind of that little kind of snake belly thing going on, lizard belly thing going on, where you got some nice little creases going through here. But that's just the crease brush. It pushes in, but it also pinches as it goes to create creases, which can be a really cool way to do shape. It's actually one of my favorite tools. It's great for kind of doing stuff like this. Right, you can come back in here, crease this up a bit. And you can just see, just with these brushes alone, you start to do some cool stuff. So just with the crease brush by itself, you're provided with lots of new opportunities to add finer details. And you'll see that if I go down, page down, you see how your low res wouldn't be able to support that detail, right? Your low res can't support that level of detail. So we need to be up at hundreds of thousands of polygons to start to get this kind of detail in there. So that's a great introduction to sculpting, and I'll stop the video.